Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for your patience in letting us have an extra minute or two to let people join us, not in the middle of everything. My name's Christine Muir. I am the community librarian at Cary Library. I am going to enable the live transcript on Zoom for those who appreciate subtitles. If you find the subtitles distracting, you can click on the live transcript button and choose hide subtitles. I am recording this program. I just told you that, right? All of the programming at the library is made possible by the foundation. So we always like to thank and recognize those donors at every opportunity. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. So if you would use the Q&A button to enter any questions that you have for our speaker, I will moderate that at the end of the night. And if you have a question about Zoom, technology, something with the library, you're welcome to use chat and I'll answer those as they come in. To hide the subtitles, click the live transcript button, or you may have a little up arrow next to the live transcript button. Click that and you'll see hide subtitles. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Nee Hanafin, who walked her first Camino in 2010 with her 18-year-old daughter. She has since walked 7 more Caminos in Spain and Portugal of varying lengths. She co-founded the Boston chapter of the American Pilgrims on the Camino in 2012 and has been mentoring pilgrims ever since. And I am very excited about this program on a personal level because I am an avid hiker. So I'm excited to learn about some international opportunities for that. Nancy, I hand you the microphone. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, no, mon plaisir. All right, so I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to share my screen now as I so expertly set it up, but then I moved to something. So give me 1 second and we'll get this rolling. You see, little adjustment. All right, here we go. So as Christina said, I walked my first Camino in 2010, and many of you might be familiar with the movie The Way. This is what generally introduced the Americans to the Camino de Santiago. I walked before The Way, so it was a little bit different back then. But when I came back, I was so enthused and so grateful for such a trip that I co-founded the American Pilgrims, or the chapter of American Pilgrims, excuse me. So I invite you, if you want to get involved or any more information. We're a nonprofit. We don't share your emails. We don't charge you money. We are only there to support the Camino de Santiago and keep its spirit alive, both here and in Spain, where we do distribute many grants all along the Camino, different organizations. So that's my official introduction there. And so on to the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. So this is the 1,000-year-old pilgrimage. Camino means way in Spanish. Santiago is Spanish, or Iago is Spanish for James, which is a transmogrification of the Latin Jacob. And Compostela comes from Campus Stellae, field of stars, and the Milky Way strewn out over the walk as you pass underneath it. It's one of the 3 great pilgrimage routes in Christendom, if you will. In French, it's called Le Chemin, Jakobsweg in German, and we here say the Way of St. James. As I said, it's one of the 3 great routes. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of the Camino, because there are actually people that walk and they have no idea that it is St. James. So I'll give you a little history of that, and then we'll go through sort of an itinerary, if you will, to give you a taste. So one of the 3 great pilgrimage sites, if you were a pilgrim to Jerusalem, you were a palmer, you came back with palm branches. And Rome were called roamers or romeros, and pilgrims were called peregrinos, from the Latin peregrinus, meaning wanderer. Now, pilgrimage, the question of pilgrimage, it's odd for a 21st century secular mindset to wrap yourself around pilgrimage and around the divine. So you kind of have to keep the medieval mindset at your fingertips. So generally, pilgrimage is a journey, especially a long one, made to some sacred place as an act of religious devotion. So what does St. James, though, have to do with the divine? And what makes Santiago a sacred place? So the essence of the divine, well, to the medieval mindset, it was the source not only of all life, but of all power. St. James was one of the apostles, one of the chosen ones, and he walked with the divine, with Jesus. So to be close to the divine was, and for some still is, a universal desire. And for many, it was the goal of their life. So we're going to look a little bit about St. James and what made him so special. So he is, in fact, James the Greater. There were two St. James. And he was the apostle sent to Iberia, where he converted a total of about 4 people before he returned to the Holy Land and was beheaded as the second martyr of the church. He was the son of Zebedee and Salome, and thus he was the cousin of Jesus. So his mother was the Virgin Mary's half-sister. And according to some of the Gospels, she was present at the crucifixion as well as one of the first to learn of his resurrection. So he was also the brother of John, the quote unquote beloved disciple, and he was a fisherman. He was one of the first of the 4 disciples. So he was also present at 3 major events of Jesus's life. The first one was the miracle of Jairus's daughter, where she, in some accounts, she had already died and he raised her. The other one was the agony in Gethsemane, where he promptly fell asleep with the 2 others. And the third one was at the Transfiguration. So these are very important, as I said, events of Jesus's life. And then you'll come across through the Camino, through legends, or actually through all of Christianity, legends, traditions, or history, and what is fact, what is fiction. And so you have to keep in mind about those things, and also that legends and traditions meld into the same thing. So one of the big legends about St. James was that is attached to the Pentecost, and it states that each apostle was sent to the land of the language that he was speaking. So James was sent to Iberia, what we now know as Spain, which was a major Roman outpost at the time. Another legend, and this is now an ancient local tradition, is that in the year of AD, or current era 40, the Virgin Mary appeared to James on the bank of the Ebro River in Spain. And James was very despondent. He had hardly convinced anybody to follow him or follow Christ's message. And Mary appeared on a pillar and assured him that people would eventually be converted and their faith would be as strong as the pillar she was standing on. And she gave him the pillar as a symbol and a wooden image of herself, and then asked him, please, build a chapel here on this spot. And that is now what you will find if you go to Zaragoza, Spain, is the Basilica of Our Lady of the Pillar, Nuestra Señora del Pilar. And then the other tradition is that after he returned to Palestine, that he was beheaded and was taken by his followers, a handful of his followers, in a stone boat through the Mediterranean, through the Straits of Gibraltar, and brought up to what we would now call Galicia to bury his body there. And of course, as all these legends and traditions have, they had to ask the local queen for permission to bury him, and she set out tasks for them to conquer, which they did. And then, of course, the local queen converted, etc. So that's what happened to St. James. And then you hear nothing of St. James for 700 years, nothing, all quiet on the Western Front. Meanwhile, at about the year 700, Spain was like much of Europe, a compilation of small kingdoms, a lot of bickering back and forth. But one of the kings down south was having a little trouble with those Basques up north, and he asked for some help from the Arabs across the water. And of course, a few too many showed up, liked what they saw, decided to stay. And within 5 years, the Arabs have conquered nearly all of Spain. So by 800, you can see most of Spain was under the emirate, except for this little slice up here, and that was Asturias. And Alfonso I, constantly trying to keep them, the Arabs at bay. He had the benefit of the mountains there that helped to protect him, but he had some serious battles that he had to undertake. His grandson was even more besieged, Alfonso II. He asked the Basques, or here's the Vasconia, for some help. And then when that didn't go so well, he asked Charlemagne, who did come south in about 779, and he did fight the Arabs at the Battle of Pamplona. Charlemagne actually said he had a vision, a dream that he was told to intervene. And so he saw it as part of God's divine plan for the Christians to come down. So they're still under siege, but a few decades later, 811, suddenly a Christian monk saw beautiful lights playing across the sky in a field in Galicia. And when they went to investigate, it seemed what these dancing stars were actually illuminating a crypt. So soon the word went out to Alfonso II that we think that we have found the bones of St. James. And there is the Campus Stellae, the field of stars. So the bishop in Oviedo talked to Alfonso. He rode down. So the first pilgrimage was made from Oviedo. Then he presented it to the Pope and to Charlemagne. And then St. James was eventually declared the patron of his empire and eventually all of Spain. So Campus Stellae, field of stars. So this story of St. James was resurrected in perfect timing, however, to spearhead the reconquest or the reconquista of Spain for Christianity. And you'll see here a depiction of St. James as a knight slaying the Arabs underfoot in a decisive victory at this Battle of Clavijo in 844. But it was a mythical battle. This battle actually never happened. James became a talisman for the Christians and was referred to for centuries as Santiago Matamoros, or the Moor Slayer. Very politically incorrect. So you now had a war on two fronts, Christendom had, if you will. You have the Asturias trying to keep them at bay, and then you have the Crusades in the Middle East, who are also trying to regain the kingdom down there, but they're not going so well. And with the fall of Jerusalem, all those knightly orders they fled home. Many resettled in Spain. The Knights Templar, for instance, and then the Knights of Santiago were organized there. And their job was solely to protect pilgrims and to continue to push out the Arabs. And what this allowed for is pilgrims to come, and they would come down through France, visiting various holy sites and relics along the way. So little by little, Christian forces pushed the Arabs south. And finally, about 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella, by marrying, they joined forces, and that was the final thrust to get the Arabs out of Spain. So you can see by the 15th century, there was a small group down near Granada in the south. So those pilgrims' paths exist to this day. They took various routes, but they originally would have gone over the mountain pass where there was protection from the Christians, if you will. But it was also one of the easiest ways to pass over. So there are various routes. As you can see, we've got, this is the most popular route, the Frances, but you have the Norte, the Primitivo, the Via de la Plata, and all of these routes across Europe that combine down into Spain. So I'm going to focus on the Camino Frances because, one, it's the most traveled route. The reason it's the most traveled, it is the best supported. There are more restaurants, more places to stay. And as I said, you come over the easiest pass, and that's what people on foot generally would do. So the first thing you need if you're going to undertake this journey, is a pilgrim's passport, or what we call a credencial. And you can order this for free from our organization about 3 weeks before you before your flight. Email us and you will receive this in the mail. If you forget, there are various places in France and in Spain where you can pick them up along the way. But I say it's nice to have. It's one less thing to do when you land. So it's your credencial and albergues. And the reason there's two reasons why you have a credencial. One is to get into the albergues, and these are the places where pilgrims stay. It's just a small folded cardboard booklet that's empty when you receive it. But when you present it along the way, each albergue, which you might be called a refugio or a hostel, has a unique stamp, and they will stamp it, and then they will date it. And at the end of your journey at the cathedral in Santiago, they'll review it to see that, oh yeah, okay, you walked. They're seeing if you're walking here. And so that's how you will get your Compostela at the end. Now, these albergues come in all shapes and sizes. We have municipal ones that are owned by the local authority. They're 5 to 10 euros. So that's about $7 to $12 a night to stay. You have parochial ones run by a parish or the diocese. As I said, some offer pilgrims mass very nearby. Lots of them have communal dinners. They're 5 to 10 euros, or donativo, whatever you feel like giving. There's loads of monasteries and convents along the route. Associations run them, Spanish or Dutch or Germans. And in fact, the American Pilgrims helps support many of these and sends volunteers, or what they call hospitaleros, to help run them. And then there are donativos. Now, excuse me, they're not donativos. This is my reminder to tell you that donativo does not equal free. These donations that are given every night help to pay for the food of the pilgrims the next night. So it is whatever you can afford to give. And when I'm there, some of these places are so special that I often pay double what I would pay in some of the other places. And then you have the private ones, $12 to $22 or what have you. And then the other options you have are casa rurals, which are small Spanish B&Bs, and there are little hotels in the bigger towns and such. So there's a wide variety of accommodations for a wide variety of budgets. And like I said, they come in all shapes and sizes. This is an old farmhouse in a barn, beautiful old stone. This is one of the places that American Pilgrim sends volunteers, right along the river's edge where you can cool off in the afternoon. This is the municipal in Burgos, a big city. It's like 5 stories high, very modern and clean. You have your own light and you have your own plug to charge your phones. You have a locker to lock your things up. This is a little bit like a Howard Johnson's in Cacabellos. This one you could sleep inside or out. This is a private one. Privates, you'll have fewer people per room, generally speaking. Again, they'll have locked drawers, little curtains for privacy. This is one of the donativo ones. It's one of the special albergues. They provide a big communal meal. You sleep on mattresses on the ground, but anyone that goes there says they'll go back in a heartbeat. It's so wonderful. So another question, and this is one of the biggest factors in your decision, is where to start. And that generally depends upon how much time you have. So many Americans don't have 5 weeks to walk from the border of France. And most people assume that's the beginning of the Camino. Not so. The beginning of the Camino is wherever you start walking from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out through the Camino Frances, start pretending as if you're going to start there. But I'll jump in where different places are where people with less time than 5 weeks can start their Caminos. I always just emphasize, please try not to walk less than 10 days, so that you don't rob yourself of a rich experience. So from Saint-Jean Pier De Por, it's about 5 weeks here. about 30 days, 28 to 30 days from Pamplona. And then it obviously goes further down. So as I said, I'm going to assume that you're going to start from the French border. How do you get there? Well, Saint-Jean-Pied de Port is not that difficult to get to, but it's not that easy either. You can fly into Paris and shake off some jet lag there. And you can walk to where the French pilgrims started. You can go to Tour Saint-Jacques or even to Notre Dame to get your first stamp in your book. And then take a high-speed train or a quick flight. If you're walking the whole 5 weeks, I like to recommend Aer Lingus through Dublin, mainly because you can get a cheap flight to Biarritz, a Ryanair flight. And then when you finish your walk in Santiago, they have seasonal return flights straight back to Dublin. So that is what I did with my daughter, but that is something you would do if you were going to start at the French border. And if you do go through Dublin, you can go to St. James Church and have your first stamp or sello or sello, as they say in Spanish, right at St. James Church, where the Irish pilgrims traditionally left from. And it's handily right around the corner from the Guinness storehouse. Hydration is very great concern of most pilgrims, so we have to keep that in mind as she drinks from a Guinness glass. So from Biarritz, as I said, if you take that Ryanair flight, there are bus and train options right to Saint-Jean. There is a woman, very enterprising Basque woman, who has this company called Express Borico. And she ferries pilgrims all from the airport right to Saint-Jean and up and over the mountain and etc. She's done quite well for herself in the last 10 years. And any of these places that you would like to know more of, you certainly can email me and I can send you lists. Happy to forward those to you. So Saint-Jean-Pied de Port is a classic little French village. It's at the foot of the pass is what that means. And once part of the Kingdom of Navarre. Great little French village nestled there, well known for its sheep and goat cheese. People out walking, buying their baguettes with their kids midday. It's a good idea to stock up on some provisions when you arrive and before you hit the hay on your first night, because there is only one place to stop on the way up and over on the first day. So bread and cheese and dried fruit are great suggestions. I like to recommend this little place, Bellari, because it has communal dinner and pilgrim introductions, and it really is the essence of the spirit of the Camino. It is a downhill walk on your way out of town. And keep in mind, if you've flown overnight, you'll be jet lagged, etc. So I recommend only walking halfway up the mountain the first day and stopping in town and checking out, the site, poking around town, looking at the sites. But when you do head out later and walk through the Porte de Notre Dame, stop in the Church of Our Lady, take a little time to reflect, sit, make yourself ready for this journey, which is quite the journey. Walk through the port under St. John the Baptist above you, with Our Lady bidding you goodbye on the other side, over the gorgeous little bridge, and then turn left up the mountains. So the distance on the first day from Saint-Jean to Roncesvalles is 25 kilometers or 15 miles. So you're going to get very used to kilometers when you get over there. So 25 kilometers is the average walking day on the Camino, average. You can make it as long or as short as you want. On the Camino Francis, it's very easy to do that because there are places to stay every 5-6 kilometers. Not so on this first day. And you could be jet lagged and quite tired this first day. There's my daughter who just graduated from high school 3 days before. She didn't think she needed to train at all for this trip, so she was a little fatigued. So that's why I suggest staying halfway up the mountain the first day, explore Saint-Jean, and just do a short 3-hour walk on your way out. It was beautiful French countryside. And this is the only place up there on the first day, Refuge d'Orisson. It's French and reservations are required. I would not try to get up there and thinking you'd get a place to stay. It is a French gîte, if you will, so it's more expensive than the Spanish ones, about 30 euros a night, but it does come with breakfast and dinner. And it's the only place that I say you'd have to make a reservation besides in Santiago at the end. Everything else in between is up to you. You don't need reservations. You might want to get them ahead of time, but you don't need them. And this is where you hang out for the day. We did not take my advice. We started out in the morning, walked right up there, arrived there at like 12, and we had nothing to do for the next 5 hours. So this is what I say to you folks, do it the other way around. So when you leave the next day, you continue up and up, and this is the road you're walking on. I think one car passed us, maybe. And in terms of training, nothing can really prepare you for, 25-kilometer a day walks, but it would be enormously helpful to walk as often as possible before you leave and try to do a 6 to 10 miler on the weekends. You will be grateful. So will your feet. The climb up over the Pyrenees is probably the toughest you experience on the whole Camino. There is one other that's about the same, Osobrera, but you will have been walking quite a bit by the time you hit there, so you won't give it the same thought. You're in that vast country, like I said, and this is the gentle end of the Pyrenees. And they're always reminders of the trials of past pilgrims. If you watch the movie The Way, this is where Martin Sheen's son disappeared in a fog or a cloud and was killed. So this is my daughter's last smile for 3 days. She was not a very happy camper. You come up and over, and then you come down through one of the largest and oldest remaining beech forests in Europe. It's a gorgeous walk, about 5 hours up and over from that refugio. So about an 8-hour hike if you were to leave directly from Saint-Jean, until you can just see the tip of the monastery over her head. And this is Our Lady of Roncesvalles. It's a 12th century monastery, Augustinian. Roncesvalles means Valley of the Thorns. And it is here that the famous poem, Latin hymn, La Preciosa, proclaims that its doors are open to the sick and the well, to Catholics as well as to pagans, Jews, heretics, beggars, and the indigent. And it embraces all like brothers, which is true of the Camino then, and even more so of the Camino today. There are people of all walks and of all faiths, or none, on the Camino these days. So this is the place, this is the Albergue, if you will, the hospice where we stayed. 17th century, they hosted about 25,000 pilgrims a year. They're getting up there now, I will say. So when you arrive, they have a nightly pilgrim's mass in this little teeny humble looking church, 12th, 13th century church. There is a stunning Gothic interior, which I didn't see because it's at night. So I stole this little pic off the internet. This was the atmosphere when I went. The service was all by candlelight, a special pilgrim's blessing. The priest does not read out your names, but he does read out your country of origin. And then he asks everyone to give the saint in Santiago, St. James, a hug from him. This is the Albergue, made somewhat famous in the movie The Way, and the most realistic scene in the movie. It was every bit like it was in the movie. Lots of ronfleurs or snorers, and my daughter's body language tells it all. The, oh God, what have I gotten myself into look. Famous sign on the Camino, which almost every pilgrim stops in front of. So that's 800 kilometers almost, so 500 miles ahead of you. It was quite cold that day. It was a reminder. This is where my daughter and I had our first fight. Yep, 2 days into it, she hadn't spoken to me, and I had to give her the old, this is your life lesson. You're going to get thrown stuff at you, and this is where you decide what's going to get you through it. It's your attitude. So I told her in 2 days, you're going to be in Pamplona speaking Spanish and you'll be fine. And that's what it is. It's a 2-day walk from Roncesvalles to Pamplona, which is another great place to start your walk. But then you ask, how do you get there? So very simple, shells and arrows. There are guidebooks, but in fact, you don't need a guidebook. I like having one, but you don't need one. The scallop shell is associated with St. James. You go to any church and you see the scallop shell, it means that they're referencing St. James. And there are many legends associated with the scallop shell. You know, when his body was brought to Spain, it washed overboard. When they brought it up, it was covered with shells. There was a groomsman on the beach, and his horse reared up and he flung in the water, and then they dragged him up and he was covered with shells. There's a number of legends. But in reality, the scallop shell is an ancient symbol of birth and new life. But in the Christian context, it's new life through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So you see them everywhere. Here's on a stela that lines the way. They're found throughout Spain on the route, on people's buildings. This is the way from Le Puy, France. They're all over the churches, the handrails. In cities, it's like our version of a freedom trail. You follow them through the cities. Pilgrims affix them to their backpack before setting out. In ancient times, they would get a scallop shell for their return to prove that they were in Galicia. But now you get to fly home, you don't have to walk home. And then there are the yellow arrows, the flecha amarillas. And these are also everywhere. You just follow them. And between the two of these, there's plenty of opportunity for just walking. You barely have to think. Again, you get the combo. They're on buildings, statues. And those are from 1985 or so. Father Elias from Osobrera, he asked the Galician Highway Department for their leftover paint. And he went across Spain and he painted arrows. And if you can see, if you build it, they will come. So in 2019, 350,000 pilgrims arrived in Santiago. And there they are. And the locals will keep painting them, business owners. A lot of locals make sure they're painted so you don't wander down their back garden. They're all through the cities. And it allows you to just walk and take in the beauty all around you. You don't even have to think about it. Or you can create beauty for others. So we've arrived in Pamplona. She's all smiles now because we only walked 15 kilometers or about 9 miles that day. And this would be a 4-week starting point for anybody interested out there. And it's fairly easy to get to Pamplona, much easier to get there than it is to Saint-Jean. And you could fly into Madrid and you have your choice of bus or train right to Pamplona, which is a great old city made famous by the running of the bulls, which one should know is a 9-day festival, which I did not know 10 years ago. So be mindful if you go in July. This is one of the big albergues in Pamplona. It's a former church of Jesus y Maria. And this is what their interior looks like. They had great facilities. They had a kitchen, laundry. And now we have 4 days through Navarra with its rich farmlands to the next big city and walking all through the Rioja region. But you come out and there's your first test out of Pamplona, Alto de Perdón. Ancient tradition here states that if you die in the ascent, you will go straight to heaven. And you can see the windmills there beckoning you. Navarra had a goal to be completely energy sufficient by 2025, I think. So you see them on every hillside in Navarra. And one village up there in the hill, lovely. There's a place to stop. There's fountains to get water. And up on the hill, more pilgrims. And you can see the field of stars over their heads. and down the other side. And note the terrains. You're on street, you're on trails, you're on gravel, all types. But again, walking, reflection, and taking in the beauty of the Spanish countryside. It's everywhere on your walk. Wheat fields, the silence that's around you as well. And you can be as silent or as loud as you want on the Camino. You can walk alone all day, part of the day, some of the day, or none of the day. You can see one of the giant bales of wheat like I have over my shoulder. And walking, becomes a form of meditation when you do these long distance walks. The tapping of the poles in concert with your feet, your thoughts are all that you have to process. It's not easy. This is why I implore people to take at least 10 days to walk. The first few days are difficult. It's a test, a physical and spiritual test. And they say it's part of 3 stages of personal growth: physical conditioning, emotional reflection, and spiritual awareness. By the 3rd day, your body's really hurting, I can tell you. You're really just noticing pains going from your foot to your knee to your hip. By the 5th day, for some people, blisters start appearing. But by some miracle, your body adapts and the aches subside, the blisters heal. Your 10,000 steps on your Fitbit on this walk becomes 25,000, 30,000. You do it on day 1 and keep going. And you get stronger and stronger each day. And then you have these little Camino Angels that come around and they help you get through it as well. And a good night's sleep changes everything. And it's amazing. And you will be astonished what the human body, your body, is capable of doing. What you think you cannot do, it turns out you can. And then you ask, why pilgrimage? You could take a bus, you could take a car and drive through all this, especially for people in the 21st century. But the key is like the shedding of material possessions and your everyday worries. You don't have a cell phone. Well, you might have it, but you mightn't have service. No computer. And it's about getting in touch with your inner self. Solitude, reflection, and this one word I love is detachment. One of the most important gifts. You can detach from the life that you had. And that's why they call it, you're like in a liminal state. You're in between. And this is why I ask people, even if you don't think you can carry your pack the whole way, because they do have services over there that will carry your pack for you, transport it ahead for you. Even if you think you cannot do it, pack as if you will, because it forces you to pare down and decide what you truly need. And that's a reflection of what you truly need in life. So carrying everything with you gives you that opportunity to realize what you truly need. But you do need to eat. So here's a little bit about the pilgrim's daily routine. The mornings will vary depending where you are. If the albergue has a kitchen, you may have gone to a shop the night before and bought some yogurt or some fruit before you set out. Usually I would rise and get out and walk for about 3 to 5 miles, about 1 to 2 hours. And then we would sit and treat ourselves to one of these babies, a café con leche, and maybe a croissant or a Spanish tortilla. And the reason is because it's Spain, so most of the shops aren't open. There are some very enterprising people that open them early for the pilgrims. But if you walk for an hour or 2, you're going to find a cafe. For lunch, again, if you have cheese and nuts or fruit, you can have that with you. But you do want to be out of the midday sun by 2 o'clock. So usually lunch is a quick break, depending upon the time of year. Sometimes you find these at these honor stands. You just donativa, leave what you want. Or you just pick them for free if you happen to walk in September. You can stop and pick up a bocadillo for a couple of bucks. They're delicious. Some Spaniards, this is a whole table of Spaniards, they like to keep their routines and have a nice big meal in the middle of the day and something to wash it down with. This was actually a special stop in Melide, where the pulpo capital is. So That's a special orujo, a local brew. I usually wait for a beer at the end. I'm not a big day drinker, so I like my cold, frosty one at the end of the day. And then dinner, well, in Spain, most people don't eat dinner till about 10 o'clock. But since most of the albergues close by 10:30 or 11, pilgrims are not like most Spaniards. So as along this Camino, most of these villages exist solely because of the pilgrims. So they have entirely different schedules. Even the tiniest of village will have 2 or 3 establishments, and they serve what's called a menu peregrino. About €9 or $10, you get 2 courses, dessert, and wine. Lots of wine, as much as you want, basically. And you're walking through the Rioja, and then further on, you'll be walking through the Bierzo region. So there's no shortage of it. And it's good and cheap. It's cheaper than the Coca-Cola. So it's this typical Camino fare of salada mixta. Gambas are the shrimp in the back, the shrimp sauteed in olive oil and garlic, pimiento de padron. My poor daughter thought she ordered Galician soup, and she got Galician stew. So she got the cow's vertebrae and sausage. And well, we thought it was hilariously funny. She didn't seem to find the humor in it. Of course, your dessert oftentimes is local cheese with honey, or they might just give you an ice cream bar. It's very simple. But if you stay in one of those special albergues where a communal meal is part of your of the stay, things are very different. And this is a great place to meet other people. The meals are taken in communion with others. You get to know your fellow pilgrims, and you can form what we call in the way of Camino family. And these are all the places where you sit and join together, different meals. You see that salada mixed everywhere. Some make it better than others. This place was a fabulous with the carrot ginger soup and tossing it at the table, the carbonara. So I talk about a Camino family. Well, what's interesting about the Camino is there are no cars, fancy or otherwise. There are no titles, CEO, CFO, PhD. There's no social status. It's a world free of the usual, what did someone call it, judgmental preliminaries. And it's a communal journey. And this sense of community is very strong, walking with others. And there's a sense that this journey is communal. We're all on our own pilgrimage in life, but there are others there to support you. So this is my first Camino family, but you'll see, I'm going to throw a lot of people in here. Austria, he was an organic farmer from Austria. Stefania was from Brescia, Italy. The journey's intense. And when you're walking with people, it's a shared journey, and people are there to support you. And come on in and sit down. Come sit and join us, have dinner with us. I put this one in to answer questions about ability or stamina or strength, because people sometimes right off the bat say, oh, I can't do it. I'm too old, or I'm too out of shape. I'm too this. Well, Alberto was 83, and it was his 3rd Camino walking. And every time he'd walk by us, or we'd walk by him, depending on who's taking a break, he would just say, piano, piano. And he arrived in Santiago the day after we did. So it is doable. These gals, we call them the Siesta Queens. This was an aunt and a niece, and they would do the Spanish thing. They'd come in at 2 o'clock and they'd be tucked into their beds, sound asleep. But they made it, no problem. Folks from Ireland, Grace and her husband. Spain, a whole family of brothers and the father, they walked for about a week every year. And then their whole family met them in Santiago at the end. And you can see some of these people don't have big backpacks. They are having them forwarded. And then this was a great couple, Tino and Lynn, that we met from Florida. She was a university professor. Tito was Cuban. He would, in the morning, we'd walk out, we'd start saying the rosaries, and he would say it in Spanish and we respond in English. But like our friend Mary, you can see her behind there. She wasn't into that. So she just fell back about 100 yards. And then after about 20 minutes, we all gathered up again. So there's a great sense of community. And it's one of the great gifts of the Camino, all these people that you meet. We have Australians and New Zealanders here, and more Germans, French, Spanish, and French Canadian. My Dutch friend and my friend from Lebanon there. Mexicans. I mean, it's just great. Claudio was from Switzerland. He had a very quiet spiritual side. He was always saying, let's go check out this church. So like there is a lot of opportunity for traditional reflection, let's say. The churches line the entire route of the Camino, from these truly grand cathedrals of Burgos or Leon to these tiny little, well, this is a small one actually, because this is a tiny one. Unfortunately, many of them are closed in Spain. You can't always get into them because, except for Sundays, of course, because of all the graffiti. There is graffiti everywhere in Spain. It's riddled with it. They just can't seem to resist marking up anything. And sometimes it's, it's graffiti on top of graffiti. Sometimes it's funny, it's entertaining and amusing, especially when it looks like Claudio, but there is still plenty of places for traditional reflection. And if you want to tap into that, there's an organization called Association of Christian Welcome, where if you are into having Vespers at night and Pilgrims masses, they can hook you up with that. And as I said, there are monasteries and convents to stay in. This one is 3 days in from Saint-Jean. Old tradition of taking in pilgrims. Hopefully they'll be back after COVID is over. Granondas is another one of these very special places where they take you in, you sleep on the floor with the great communal meal. You have an opportunity to attend mass there, or go out to the shrine, out into the hillsides. Again, another one, Donativo, beautiful place to stay with those type of communal dinners. And here's one of the Hermitage out in the hillside. It's dates from 712. And next thing you know, you're heading into Burgos on your Castilian Meseta. And what they talk about the Meseta, the high flat plain of Spain, it's 9 months of winter and 3 months of hell. Some people don't like it, but I loved it. It's a great opportunity for reflective walk and meditative walking. There's Spain's largest beer producer. They're in on the Camino game. There's the Cello or Seo you can get if you go in there with a free sample. Burgos, this is now your 3-week starting point. 13th century cathedral, beautiful town. You can see a 3-week walk. You're on the Meseta. You can easily get there from Madrid. Ferdinand and Isabella received Columbus here after his second voyage. In the 15th century, there were 32 pilgrim hospices in this town. That's how many pilgrims were walking. Today, there are 3. I was there during a feast day, lots of noise, going to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But you can see the view from the Castillo, just how close the countryside is, and maybe imagine what a medieval pilgrim's reaction would be to see this incredible Gothic cathedral, lurching out of the countryside. So now you're in the Meseta. It can be very hot in the summer, but even in June, in the mornings, it can be chilly there. And it is flat. As I said, some people's favorite part of the Camino. I really enjoyed it. It has its own different beauty. Lots of shadows. Remember, you're always walking west, so the back of your leg is going to be bronzed, quite bronzed. And I say it's Nebraska flat because the wool would be brought to the north, brought up to the Netherlands back in the 16th century. So there's always this talk about the inward journey and the outward journey. The inward journey leads to a deeper understanding of myself and maybe a closer relationship with God, but definitely a deeper understanding of yourself. This is about as hilly as it gets on the Meseta. And boom, you're in Leon, founded by the Romans in the year 70. It was a fort and it protected the gold mines there. This is a 2-week walk, and I have taken many people to Leon to start their 2-week walk. This is, to me, is an ideal American start, if you will. The cathedral was 13th century, started early, like 1205, and it was modeled after Rheims Cathedral and St. Denis in Paris. So it has Saint-Denis, it has some amazing stained glass. And in order to attract the artisans from the rest of Europe and to build these cathedrals, the king exempted many of them, the carpenters and the glazers and the sculptors. He exempted them from paying taxes. So they came. This is a basilica where they have a gorgeous 7:30 Pilgrim's Mass with a lovely blessing. And then in the morning, out you go. You just follow the shells out of the city. And you go by the Parador. This is where you would have stayed in the 12th century. This was made famous in the movie The Way. But if you have the time, check it out inside. It's really gorgeous. It's like a museum, but it's a hotel, so you can poke around, have a drink in the lobby. Again, here's your 2-week Camino. So this is 1 week of the 2-week. So to give you an idea, if you left on a Friday and then took the next 2 work weeks off, you would be back in your house by the Sunday, 10 days off from work. This is the first stop. You can bus it out of the city if you like. A lot of pilgrims do that. Instead of slogging across all the tarmac, the concrete, whatever, bus out to the edge of the city. Stop in this El Virgen del Camino, where they have this modern facade and they've kept the Baroque altarpiece. And then you're back out onto the Meseta. This is why it's great for a 2-week walk, because you're starting in the flats. You're barely, well, it's still flat. Even on the 3rd day, you barely know you're walking up. And, the temperature can get hot. So you want to get in by noon, do as the Spaniards do, because there's repercussions if you don't. That is not a rash. That's just broken blood vessels from the heat. And now we can talk a little bit about shoes, the most prized possession of the pilgrim. Good advice is to start walking as soon as you decide to go. Break those shoes in now. The most important piece of equipment, and you really should take care of them and your feet. Double lined socks, lanolin all over your toes in the morning. Let them air them out a couple times a day. These pilgrims did not train, and they did not take care of their feet. They didn't even have a first aid kit, actually. I'm sewing some blisters up on another pilgrim there. But again, still in the flats, there's Hospital de Orbigo. This is the site of Europe's last true medieval tournament. Gorgeous medieval bridge, restored the last couple of years. And you slowly start to head up into the foothills of rural Spain. Always reminders that you're a pilgrim. Right after this, we encountered one of our most famous Camino Angels. There's a famous saying that the Camino always provides. So whether it's these Camino Angels just appear out of nowhere, help you find a place to sleep, a friend to walk with, maybe someone to talk to. And this guy, David, was from Barcelona. He's quite famous. He was a former alcoholic and drug addict. He lost everything. And then he walked the Camino. And to give back, he provides donativa refreshments because he found a new life. He wants to help others find a new way as well. So lots of chill, hanging out there. The Camino is the way, the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father without me. So you're in Astorga. Here's a 12-day walk, another option for Americans, Astorga. Beautiful Maragato town, known for its chocolate. The bells that ring every afternoon. Gaudi's Episcopal Palace is there. It's a lovely place to start. And again, you're climbing a little bit. You don't really even know. This day was particularly hot. It was about 105 degrees this day. And I saw this sign and I thought, oh my gosh, cervezas? Cervezas. But I didn't read it right. And it says cerezas, which means cherries. Local cherries this guy was selling on the roadside. But I was happy for those too. The Camino has its own economy. You'll have people, little businessmen all over the place. This is the Cowboy Bar, very famous. At the time, it was the only operating establishment there. Now it's helped to revive. The Camino has revived this town. Rabanal, one of the stops on the way up the mountain. There's an opportunity. Benedictine monks are next door. You can stay for several days there if you like. They have vespers there at night with people from all faiths all over the world saying small prayers in their own languages. The Knights Templars were here in the 12th century. So this village has been around a long time. And we do supply volunteers here to this confraternity of St. James hostel, Albergue. But you're still climbing and you're heading towards a very special monument on the Camino. It's very misty in the mornings. up through the mountains until you hit what's called the Cruz de Ferro. And this is a pilgrim's monument. It's the Iron Cross, the Cruz de Ferro. And the tradition is to leave a stone here you've brought from home, symbolic of a prayer or a request, or a weight being lifted, or a break with your past, or a promise to begin anew. So that whole mound is made of prayers and hopes and dreams and thanks. And then a little further on, you've got one of the other oddities, the last of the Knights Templar. So he claims to be. And you can stay up at his place. It has no electricity, no running water if you like to rough it. And then what goes up must come down. You're 5,000 feet up, and you come down into the heat of Pamplona. And this is why it's important to keep filling those water bottles. There's plenty of opportunities. You cross over so you can see how dried up the riverbed is, over another medieval bridge, and on to Pamplona, a 10-day Camino, another opportunity. You can get there by train from Madrid. And this is the castle of the Knights Templar, the last stronghold. They were eventually disbanded by Rome because of their financial strength. So they took all their lands and all their money, disbanded them. And into the Bierzo, another famous wine region of Spain, another hot day where a Camino Angel, an organic vineyard owner, in this hut called the Pilgrim's Inn to have a cold beer or some wine with him in the cool of the shade. Another Villafranca del Bierzo where you start really to climb. And this is the only other big climb on the Camino I talked about at the beginning. You're going up. Now, I've never climbed to the top. I always stop right about here. You can either pick going down the straight highway, or you can go up over the hill. And I like to go up over the hill because it's beautiful up top. And because I know I'm not going all the way up to the top of the big mountain. So this is the road up. You know, it's a climb, about 40 minutes up to La Faba, where I like to stay. It's a gem. There's a kitchen in here. There's like a 14th, 15th century little chapel there where they have candles lit, Eastern meditative music playing during the day. They have a prayer service, very ecumenical at night. It's run by Germans. We ended up singing He's Got the Whole World in His Hands at the end of it. It's lovely. Great fountain for, purposely built to soak your toes in. And then what you get to do is you wake up the next morning and receive one of the great gifts of the Camino, if the weather is fine, the most incredible sunset on the Camino. Sunrise, Nancy, sunrise. So this is the only other climb, which doesn't feel like a climb because you've been trained by now. Beautiful Galician countryside. This is Osobrera, a Celtic village. But remember, Galicia equals rain. It's very much like Ireland. You can get rain. I walk in September, so I don't generally have too much rain. And now you come down, you have one of the few places where you can take a choice. I always go left and head toward the oldest seminaries in the Western world, 6th century, Samos. You can stay in here. And you're through, this is really rural Spain. If any of you have read these articles in The Guardian or the New York Times about whole villages for sale, this is the area in Galicia. But you end up in Sarria, which is the 1 week starting point. And as I always say, it's a slog. At every pilgrim town, Camino town, it was built on a defensive hill. So you're always walking uphill at the end of the day. So Sarria is a 5-day walk. And this is where most Spaniards start their walks. And a lot of Americans say, oh, I'm going to do this. The reason why I don't suggest it is because it takes a while for your body to break in. And then you've walked, you're feeling good by the 4th day. And by the 5th day, you're starting to know people. And then boom, the walk is over and you're in Santiago. So I always try to emphasize, please try to add a little bit more time to your walk. This is our friend from Georgia. He built his own little trolley, didn't feel like carrying heavy stuff. Puerto Marin, this was a town you can see up here. The whole town was here. This is a reservoir. They took down that 10th century church and rebuilt it up top. Again, there's your walk up at the end of the day. This was the Knights of the Order of Santiago. Sorry, it was a 13th century church. And it looks like a fortress because it did serve as a fortress. There's a little bit of a Camino asceticism. There are people that try to really go to the extremes. One Filipino priest ran it in bare feet, etc. But he was a marathoner. This guy, he didn't mean to walk it. He just lost a shoe and he said, oh, screw it. I'm just going to toss the other one. But it's not all, seriousness. Mary, our friend, decided to just sit down one afternoon, plunk herself down, not move, because that was her view. Who can blame her? But the cheap wine and the beer and silliness then ensued, because Marilyn happened to have the only piece of makeup eyeliner in the whole county, I would say. And, it's what pilgrims do. And our friend Manu with the real mustache feeling a little left out. But we're in Galicia, the home of pulpo, the national dish, octopus, where you can have it cut up. They boil it, they chop it up with big scissors, and they drizzle it with olive oil and a little bit of pimento on a wooden board. This is a jorreos. This is Galicia. So you will see these everywhere in Galicia. These are grain cribs to help keep the rats out of the corn. A reminder, it's a very poor section of Spain, lots of emigration to Cuba and Argentina in the past, and now most of the people are all in Madrid. There's still some farming, but you are you're in the heart of it, if you will, staying in all these little villages. But that's its charm, and that's why the Camino is so important to these villages. We were there during the World Cup. And of course, Spain won that World Cup, hence the Spanish flag on my daughter's back. I use this photo to illustrate another part of the pilgrim's routine. This is the village laundry. This is how the women of the villages used to do their laundry. They gather around this. But this is how pilgrims use almost the same thing. You come in at 2:00, you take a shower, you grab a bunk, take a shower, grab your clothes, and you wash them here. This is why it's very important not to wear cotton. I always say the scenes in the movie The Way are ridiculous. Nobody would wear those clothes because you could never wash them and have them dry by the next day. Zip off pants, sandals, hydration bladder, short sleeves, all these things. We have a packing list that we send right out to you anytime that you email us. It's always attached. So email me if you need one. You have 2 of everything, 2 shirts, 2 pants, 2 socks, 2 knickers. That's it. And 1 thirst, maybe. I always recommend these because they're quick dry, because that's what you need. Outside, every albergue will have these out back. Or I always recommend bring a bungee cord, because if it rains, you can hang them inside. Because it does rain, because it is Galicia, but it is beautiful. These are part of you can see this has been worn basically by rain. It's dried up in this photo. And you're heading now to Monte De Goza. This is called the Mount of Joy. And this is traditionally the first glimpse that a pilgrim gets of the cathedral. You can see it off there in the distance. And down into the modern city, you're on the of Santiago. But like all the towns in the Camino, the path brings you right into the old section of town, the pedestrian section, through the tunnel, past the bagpiper, because it's a Celtic region. So there's always bagpipers. Into the Plaza Obradoro, where your Camino family, you all take photos and you wait for other people to come in. And it's like the international arrivals, at the airport. Everybody's hugging and crying. And the tradition is you go in, you save yourself a pew for the noon's Pilgrim's Mass, and you go up behind the altar and you give old Santiago there a hug. Thank him for leading you safely there. You go downstairs to the crypt for a prayer to St. James, if you're so inclined. And this is a holy year. You can go for confession for your plenary indulgence. I was the only one in my group that went. The rest of them were rather reluctant. Maybe they had too much to confess. I can't say. And then you wait for the Mass. And at the end of the Mass is the swinging of the Butufumero, which is why you need to save a seat, because busloads of tourists come in, not just pilgrims, tourists, just to watch this fly through the cathedral. Now, it's a symbolic purification of the sanctuary, but in the Middle Ages, it really was a very real fumigation of the sanctuary, because those pilgrims didn't smell too good after 800 miles. Then you hit the pilgrim's office, excuse me for the coughs. to take out your credencial. This was this fellow's credencial. He walked from Flanders, I think, with all his stamps. And there is your Compostela. And that is, quote unquote, the end. Because as they say, the Camino begins at the end and never really ends. It's your journey and of a lifetime, especially if you keep going back and back like some of us addicts do. And then I can actually now take Q&A. I think we're at it.
Yes, thank you so much. What an interesting combination of different kinds of landscapes, from the cities and villages to some of the different natural landscapes. Just a lot of variety in there.
A lot, yeah.
So we do have a couple questions in Q&A, and if people come up with more questions, you're welcome to put them in the Q&A. You can put something into chat if you would like to, that is fine. So I will start with the questions in Q&A. And I was listening to you say this every time, and I'm probably going to say it wrong anyways. Do the albergues have enough bathrooms for all the people?
Yes, they do. Yeah, I think they pronounce it albergues.
Albergues.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Everyone's going to know what you mean. If you could say albergues or albergues, or they'll know. Yeah, they do, and they, like I said, they're at all different sizes. So some of them fit 100 people. Some are only 20. Some are way better than others. You learn on the way. Okay, yeah, let's go to this one. Let's go to that one. And the guidebooks often describe them.
Okay.
Pretty well. Yeah.
And the same person also asks, why did you choose to take your daughter on your first trip, your first Camino?
It's a really good question. I was going to go by myself, and it was one of those things, your teenagers get sort of like, they go in their room a lot when they're teenagers. And then she was going to graduate. And as most of us know that have older children, once they graduate, they really do leave. So I asked my husband, like, what do you think? This could be the last time I ever spend significant time with her. And he said, it's your Camino. You decide what you want to do. So in the end, it turned out great. And she had a great time. She loved it. She was miserable the first few days, but then she made her own friends. And most of the time she was about a half an hour to an hour behind me. So it worked out fabulous.
And has she gone more than once, or did she just go the one time?
She went the one time, but she did go back and live in Salamanca, Spain for a year after she finished university.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do you have any idea whether the Camino will be open this fall? I know when we opened our program tonight, you said that Europe is planning to allow vaccinated tourists into the continent. But do you know specifically about the Camino's plans?
No, that's, first of all, they're all by region. So each province has their own rules, but you cannot travel from province to province right now. So right now you can't do it. There are people that are coming into the cathedral, but they have only walked from within Galicia. Okay. As I say, we don't know. My suspicion is because so much of Spain, never mind the Camino in the north, so much of Spain is so dependent upon tourism that last year they opened up. I had a friend that walked twice last year. Now he was from London, and he walks usually 3 times a year. He takes breaks from his job and goes over and walks for 2 weeks. But unless they're fully open, if you've never walked, unless they're fully open, I would not recommend going this year, even if they do open, because, to have a mask on, you can engage with the people as well, the people you're walking with, which is one of the greatest gifts of the Camino, or the people that you meet along the way. And if the restaurants weren't open fully, I think they will open, but I would recommend going next year if they were not. I do think they will open. It will be open.
And given that all of the provinces, like you say, kind of operate independently, is there a central source of information to find out what's open and how, like maybe there's just a section that people can do? What's a good resource for that?
Well, you can always go, I always tell people, look at the the US Embassy a site for Spain. So they'll
Okay.
tell you exactly what's open. You can also go on a site called Camino de Santiago.me. This is Ivar's site, and they're always putting up notices of what's happening. So along the Camino. So it's Camino de Santiago.me. It's called the Camino Forum is what you go on. And it's a great resource. And I could be your first resource I can email you directly, packing lists, suggested websites, etc. So don't feel free to contact me at chapters, Boston at AmericanPilgrims.org.
If you send me that email address, I will make sure to include it in the follow-up email that I send out to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that way people will have that contact information. Thank you for that. So along those lines, somebody asked if all the places to stay are communal. And I think that's relevant because that may make it harder for some places to open, right?
Yeah, there is, and there's all the cleaning protocol as well. So they did follow all those protocols this past last summer, I should say. But keep in mind, there's all types of accommodation on the Camino. Some of these like the private albergues, they may have a room with 10 bunks in it, but many of them will have a private room in the back. So you could, let's say you're walking 5 days and you just want to be by yourself one night. The guidebooks will tell you which ones have those private rooms.
That is good to know.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of questions about whether it's better to travel alone or go with a tour company, or how many companions might be ideal to travel with. What would be your recommendations along those lines?
Well, as I always say, the tour companies are my competition. And I'm free. So, or we are free, the people at American Pilgrims. You don't need a tour company. You can totally do this by yourself. Some people want a tour company. They don't want to do the planning or what have you. But that's clearly up to them. In terms of going, I think the best way to go is alone or with one other person. Because you're never going to be alone unless you choose to. You're going to meet people. You form your own family. If you feel like you're a little shy or what have you, well, then maybe bring a friend with you. But if you end up going by yourself, I've gone by myself many times since without my daughter. And truth be told, my daughter wasn't really walking with me most of the time. She just didn't. She was resenting me for at least the first 5 days. So you'll meet people. But bring one other friend. But that way, if you go in as a gaggle, 4 or 5 people, the likelihood is you won't meet as many people.
Are there any safety issues for traveling by yourself, or are there enough travelers along the way that you're never actually alone?
Yeah, I never felt, there's one place that I felt, I was out in the middle of nowhere, but it was all in my head, another talk I give, I had a statistic. Spain is it's the 8th safest member of the Association of Economic States or something like it. It's very, very safe. One woman, when I was walking by myself, said to me, and this was not on the Camino de Santiago, it was another route out in Catalonia. I said, well, I'm all by myself. And I saw no one all day, no one. And she's like, are you afraid of animals? And I said, well, the 2-legged kind. she's like, but this is Spain. They have a very low violent crime rate. And on the Camino de Santiago, there's almost always somebody within eyesight or that will come within eyesight within 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Yeah, there's always somebody around.
It looked like there was a lot of foot traffic in most of the photos that you had.
Yeah.
Can you recommend a certain time of year when it's best to travel?
So the first year I walked in June into July, and that was lovely because everything was green and it was, just colorful. And despite the brownness of the landscape, if you will, when you walk in September or October, what I like about that is it's the same temperatures, maybe even a little cooler. And I love all the fresh tomatoes. and the fresh berries everywhere, So I would not recommend walking in August. It gets extraordinarily hot. Some teachers only have the middle of the summer. Like my friend who was a teacher, she went in the middle of the summer. She fortunately did not have a heat wave, which is a real killer. And she was good because she's a teacher. So she was used to getting up at 5:30 every morning. So she'd get up, they would always get up early and leave by like 6 or 6:30. So they were well in before, the heat of the day. Now the heat of the day really is like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not so much noon. It's like around 2. So that's the only, you can, like I said, I walked into mid-July and that was okay. We had some hot days, but you get up early and you just adjust.
What about other times of the year outside the June to September window?
Well, October, November is fabulous. Just a little bit cooler. If you like walking in this weather that we're having now, that's perfect fit for you. April is great, as is May. Same type of weather, if you will. But with April and May, just be careful about Easter because the Holy Week celebrations in Spain are huge. So some people, I have friends that have gone Holy Week intentionally, and other people are like, oh, I don't know if we want to do that because the Spanish, they know how to party. Like they stay up all night long. And not so great when you're a pilgrim and you need to walk all day. So you have to choose. I also know a fellow that walked in the middle of winter and they actually they had a snowstorm and they had to come up and rescue him and his daughter off of Osobrera, off that mountain.
And do you ever have to worry about, like up in New Hampshire in the White Mountains, people don't hike in the spring because the snow is melting and it's very muddy and slippery. Are there concerns about really wet conditions in the
Yeah,
spring?
like wet, like the mud on the Meseta, if you get a rainstorm, it's mud. Like
Yeah.
I've never encountered it, but I've seen my friends' photos and it's muddy. But other than that, no, just the regular, walking in the rain. So that's why a poncho is important, I think, to cover your back, because the last thing you want to cover your backpack, I should say,
Mhm.
because you don't want to end up in an albergue and your entire backpack is soaked through. The rain flies, I find, don't protect it 100%.
We've had talks about the Appalachian Trail and through hiking that, and there's always talk about the equipment and what you protect. And some people use a dry bag inside a backpack or the
Yep.
rain covers or something, because everything you need is pretty much in that backpack. So you
Yeah.
want to protect it.
And also keep in mind, though, unlike the Appalachian Trail, you are never really far from a large or small town,
Mhm.
a pharmacy, a hospital, a sporting goods store. You far by foot. But if you had to take a taxi, you could find one within a couple of hours, either walking to a bigger town or asking another pilgrim, do you have a phone that works here? Like I don't use my phone in Spain. So yeah, so it's not like being out in the wilderness.
Okay. So you mentioned maybe trying to plan your trip to avoid Easter. We have two questions that are related. Somebody asked, what makes a year a holy year? And then how does that make a difference for vacancies and travel plans?
So 2010 was a holy year, and this year is a holy year, but they're going to extend it to next year. And the only thing that makes it a holy year is that the feast day of St. James, July 25th, falls on a Sunday. So that's it. So when I walked in 2010, you can see in that chart that I held up, there were spikes, and those were holy years, right? But a lot of those numbers come from Spanish people that start in Saria and they only walk the 1 week. So I had no problem that year with accommodations or anything of the like, anything like that. So, and I'm not saying don't go during Holy Week. You just have to decide, are you going to participate in all the Holy Week festivities? Because you can do both as a program, but, just to clarify.
Okay. So a couple people asked about starting from Portugal.
Oh.
Jamie asks, what advice would you give to a first-time pilgrim? And can you talk about the Camino Portuguese and how it differs from the Camino Francais?
Uh-huh.
Um, and Jamie's planning to walk from Lisbon this fall. And Tom asked about starting from Portugal. So can you kind of
Yeah.
combine all those answers together?
So I have done the Camino Portuguese. I walked from Porto, although I did go down to Fatima the first day just to see it and then come back up. But I have friends that I ended up walking with this couple that they walked from Lisbon. So it's a little bit shorter from Lisbon, I think, than walking from Saint Jean. I always recommend the Camino Francis first. The spirit is very different. But having said that, the last Camino I walked, one of the last ones was the Camino Portuguese, and it's becoming very similar to the spirit on the Camino Francis. The pilgrims there greet each other, you form families, more of the infrastructure is building up. There are more and more places to stay. More and more businesses are catering to pilgrims and welcoming them. The Portuguese people are fabulous. I mean, they're just great. The food is great. You walk in from the south of Galicia, so very similar. I did the central route. There's also the coastal route you can take once you get to Porto. It's really a matter of choice. Like about 5 years ago, I'd say, oh, no, do the Camino Francis first. So you'll get that feeling, that established Camino spirit. But I think it's really building on the Camino Portuguese. And the Camino Primitivo, you don't find the same spirit at all. It's very different. They have different feels to it. So I loved the Portuguese, loved it.
That's interesting because I think sometimes when people talk about hiking the Appalachian Trail as a through hike, where you start matters, right? And it changes how you plan things because of the weather and how that will change. So it's interesting to hear you talk about sort of the feeling of the different Caminos and what kind of experience you'll have and how it might be better to start with one versus another.
Yeah, versus the weather. Yeah. The nice thing about going on the Portuguese, if you pick a certain time, you can walk north with the sun in the summer, if you will. Do you know what I mean? And so that you can do that, it works.
It's nice that there's a lot of choices though.
There's dozens of choices, dozens, yeah.
So quite a few people are very interested in your daughter's experience. And you can answer this as much or as little as you want, because I don't know how much you want to speak for her. But somebody asked what it was like to be with your daughter. This person is thinking about doing it with their daughter, who's 31. But other people want to know how your daughter remembers the experience and if she would do it again now that she has some distance from that first one. So can you talk about parent-child walks?
Oh, yeah. So a 12-year-old is very different from an 18-year-old and very different from a 31-year-old. So I wish I knew. My daughter she stopped by here today. Put it this way. So she was so miserable the first 4 or 5 days. But when we returned home, she came up to me and she showed me this little drawing and she said, "What do you think?" And it was a drawing of a shell, like you see all over the Camino. And I'm like, "Oh, it's nice." Because she is an artist. So, I said, "Well, yeah," but it was little. She said, "Well, that's the tattoo I'm going to get." And I was like, "Oh,
wow."
So I said, "Well, let me tell you, your father's not going to like it." And then she's like, "I'm 18. I can do what I want." I was like, "Listen, I think it's beautiful. Let's discuss where, though, you want to put that." At least she was smart. She put it was really small and she put it below her ankle bone, the most painful place apparently to put a tattoo.
Yeah.
And then she ended up going to Fordham University. Now, Fordham has had one of the longest running courses, university courses on the Camino. You take the course in the spring and then you follow the professor over to Spain and walk. And she was like the proud peacock, like, "Oh, you guys are only walking a week, and she'd pull her foot up and show them, this is the 5 week, this is the French, So she was very proud of herself having done it. But I hope she does it again, because having walked 7 different Caminos now, you have a completely different experience on each one. They're very enriching. But from an adult mindset versus a teenager mindset, I think it'd be a whole new journey for her.
Yeah.
So and if whoever has the 31-year-old, totally do it. Totally do it together. You'd love it. I think it'd be great.
Does your daughter have any plans to do it again? Do you know?
Oh, I think I think she would. She's heading back to nursing school, and I think she would be on it right now because she's in between, so she'll start up in the fall. So I don't know. I think she would do it right now if she could get over there.
So I have 4 more questions in the Q&A. Do you have a few minutes to stay with us to finish them up?
Yes.
Okay,
I do.
thank you. I think they'll be fairly quick questions. Randy says, you mentioned obtaining the credential by emailing before leaving. Who
Yeah.
do we contact for that?
So Boston. Oh, so that's not true. That is not true. For the credential, that comes from our national headquarters. So you just go to americanpilgrims.org, and you will see up in the top, it'll say your credential, and they'll tell you how to order it. They send it out for free. At the time, they wanted, like, you want to be a member, the first, like, why would I don't even know this organization. Why would I be a member? Blah, blah, blah. But I did send them like $20 or $25 just because, they're sending me this thing for free. And then when I came back, I understood what membership was. It's about giving back to the Camino. These people like me, when they pay the membership, we're the reasons you can get the free credential. You see, it's like a donatee is paying it forward. Yeah. So just go americanpilgrims.org, look for the credential, and they'll send it to you.
So I did put that in the chat, and I wrote it down so I can include it in the follow-up email as well, so people can have that for themselves. What resource would you recommend for somebody who might not be a great planner and would maybe like to have the path laid out for them, have an itinerary already created for them?
Well, I am not allowed to recommend, because we're a nonprofit, I'm not allowed to recommend any tour groups, if that's tour companies, I should say.
Okay.
I will say there's some excellent ones in Ireland. You can just Google that. But I literally, I can't say because we're a nonprofit. But you've got a free resource here at any rate. I do have itineraries, actually. I could email you an itinerary. I have made itineraries up for friends. So that's about all I can say.
That's fair. Can you give me that email address again? I'll put it in the chat now, but then I can also send it out to people. You said it's Boston
at americanpilgrims.org.
At americanpilgrims.org.
Yeah.
Okay. And I will include that in the follow-up email as well. So if you are not allowed to recommend places, which I completely respect, somebody else asked about the Wise Pilgrim app.
Yep.
Or Grons. I don't know what
Grons is fabulous. Wise Pilgrim is good too.
Okay.
Wise Pilgrim is good too. And I think the app is still free. I'm not sure. But for those that don't know, Gronze, Gronze, is such a comprehensive site. Now it's all in Spanish, but see, I don't even speak Spanish. So, it's very easy to get around. And they have every Camino, and it's the most up-to-date resource on what places are open, where you can stay, from very high-end hotels all the way down to the donativos. And they will tell you how many pilgrims each one takes in, how much it costs, the email address, the telephone number, where it is along the route. Grons.com is a great resource. And
good to know.
Yeah, very good resource.
Good to know.
Yeah.
And our last question for the night, how many months in advance do you need to prepare in terms of getting your equipment, training, booking ahead, things like that?
A lot of it, I think, depends on if you're a hiker or not. So in terms of equipment, really, you just need about you don't need a big backpack. Like I say, 36 liter. Now that means nothing to me, really, other than the fact that that's as big as I want it, because you're only going to bring 2 of everything, right? At the most. And in terms of walking, it depends on how much you walk regularly, but if you can get yourself on a weekend to get out and walk 10 miles, the Camino will train you the rest of the way. The biggest thing is to break those boots in, because I think the number one cause of blisters are new boots. Break them in before you go, get them nice and soft, and walk everywhere. Like walk to the store, bring that backpack with you, and walk the 3 miles to the supermarket and put the milk in there and whatever. I mean, just you have to put it in your head, you know, how to do these things, incorporate stuff with your training, because nobody has, you know, all day to train for an all day walk every single day. So train yourself a little bit, and then the Camino will take over.
That's a good point about just sort of building it into your day, right? If you put the backpack on and put your groceries in there, or some of your groceries, you kind of get used to having it there. And if you don't think you need to prepare, you should read Cheryl Strayed's Wild, because she did not prepare.
Oh, do you know how many expletives I let out reading that book? Oh, Lord, it looked like Beirut with the F-bombs. I
Yes.
couldn't believe that woman.
I am an avid hiker, and I go with my best friend, and we read that book together, and she said the same thing. She said, I was so angry with her for being so unprepared and then having such a miserable start to her adventure. So if you need incentive to prepare, that's the book to read.
Or just email me and I'll show you some real photos of blisters.
Well, yeah, you had quite the pictures of people's toes.
No, those were edited. Those I redacted the bad ones, because I've had them in some of my presentations, and people are like, whoa.
Too much.
Oh yeah, TMI, way TMI. Yeah.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much. That's all the questions that we have in the Q&A. Thank you so much. We did have a lot of compliments in the chat and the Q&A. People were very...
Well, those are the ones I paid, though.
Well, thank
Cash
you.
your checks now, you know. Cash your checks now.
And if you all could give a positive feedback in the survey I send out tonight, then I'll piggyback onto that payment.
And can I just reiterate, please, folks, I love, as I said to you earlier, Christina, I love sharing the joy of the Camino. If you have questions, if you want to go, you know, contact us. Like I said, we're a totally nonprofit. We have a couple more webinars coming up this spring, but happy to help anybody walk this walk.
Thank you so much. It does look like a very interesting experience.
I hope I hear from you.
I'm already starting to think about it. So I will put into the follow-up email the website and the email address, so that you all have a way of contacting Nancy after tonight. That email will also have a link to the recording of this program. And we do send out a survey asking people what they thought of the program they attended and what else they'd like to see us offer. So please take that opportunity to fill that out and let us know. You have the option to leave your email address in the survey if you would like us to respond to you, which we are happy to do. So thank you very much for attending tonight, and big thanks to you, Nancy. That was a lot of information and a lot of pictures, and you fit it into a very nice time frame. So I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to meet you and to have you here tonight.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you all.
And good night, everyone. Walk safe.